Hey guys, this is Stel Yafty with Close.io. Trust before transactions. Let's talk about that. Sales is all about trust. Relationships and business is all about trust. Nobody can ever buy your value proposition if they're not listening to what you're saying because they're not trusting anything that comes out of your mouth. Everybody understands that kind of on a conceptual level, but I want to share a few stories, a few concepts, and a real example from our own business on how trust trumps transactions, comes before transactions, and how to think about building and creating trust in relationship with customers. Right? So let's talk about the three levels of trust first. You know, when you talk to somebody, first and foremost, you have to create personal trust, right? If I don't believe the human being I'm interacting with, it doesn't matter what the company or the brand or the product behind that person is, I'm not gonna really feel comfortable making a buying decision and interacting and purchasing from that person. So first and foremost, foundationally, you have to create personal trust. Once you have personal trust, you wanna create some trust in the product, service, or solution that you're selling me to, and you want to create some trust on the business and company and organization that's behind the product and the individual. You know, in an ideal scenario, you want to create trust on all three levels: the business, the product, the person. But you start with a person, and the transaction is probably going to end with a person as well. Now, let me share a story with you guys on how to think about trust and how not to think about trust, and why personal trumps product or even business. When we started Elastic Sales, which was an outsourcing and consulting service for B2B startups to help them scale sales. You know, we were based in Silicon Valley, and in the first few weeks when we had the idea, we wanted to validate the idea in the market in a stealth mode. So we didn't want the world to know that we were actually working on this idea, and we didn't want, to start building too many things before actually getting some validation from the market that they actually really wanted this solution. That's usually the story that I tell to people. First, we went out there and we did some cold calling for 2 weeks. We got 7 customers that were interested in it. Then we decided to actually build the business. The truth is a little bit more, a little bit less black and white and a little bit more granular, and there's a lot more colors to it. The truth is that we actually did that. We when we had the idea, the day after we started cold calling startups that had raised a Series A that we didn't personally know. We used fake names with no website, and we were pitching them on the idea of outsourcing their sales to us and us helping them scale their sales efforts. Right? That's true. Did we had 7 companies that were interested in working with us after 2 weeks of cold calling? True. But we actually didn't fully wait the entire 2 weeks before we started working on the business. So while I and our first salesperson were cold calling people, my 2 co-founders that are technical and engineers started actually coding up a product, what ultimately became Close.io and Close.io. And we assumed from the get-go that one of the big challenges that we're going to have to face is going to be trust. People trusting us with representing their brand, their company, their solution to customers, cold calling customers and pitching them on that solution, and maybe creating a bad reputation for them in the market, doing a poor job in explaining the highly technical products that we were selling. So we assume people will not trust us and will be afraid of that. And then we thought, what would be a good solution to actually address that trust issue? And we thought, you know what? We got it. Transparency in the product. Why don't we build our internal sales communication tool that will allow us to make all these calls really efficiently and kill it, but also record every single call so our customers can listen in on the calls of our salespeople to judge themselves if we're doing a good job or not, and to really understand what's going on and listening on conversation and sales calls. That's brilliant, right? We were high-fiving ourselves when we thought we got the solution. The solution is technology. We're going to build this call recording technology, and then we're going to expose every single call in a transparent fashion with our customers. That's going to build trust. That's going to be a great way to manage that objection. That's going to kill the main thing we saw in our way of success. And we made that decision really early on. And what happened? We had 2 engineers sitting around. So what did they do? They started building the software, and they started focusing on creating recording technology for the sales calls that we were making. And here's what happened. 2 weeks of sales calls, almost everybody that was interested did have concerns about trust and transparency and like actually us doing a good job at selling that product. And every single time somebody brought that up, we said, you know what? We thought about this before. We're gonna have every single call recorded. Isn't that amazing? Don't you feel a lot better now that you heard that our technology is gonna record all calls? Sure, you now are trusting us, and this is not a problem at all anymore, right? Wrong. They all heard that. They all liked it. They all like that the product will have a transparent part to it that they'll be able to listen into it. But you know what? On an emotional level, it didn't really address the problem they had to begin with. It didn't make them feel like, well, then let's get started today. They still felt apprehensive about it. They still felt resistant to the idea of giving away their baby to an outsourced sales organization to talk to their prospective customers. Even though they knew they'd always be able to listen in on those conversations, they still didn't have enough trust to actually let go and get the process started. With one specific customer, the customer that became our second paying customer and stayed with us for the longest period of time, a customer that from day one when we built the business stayed for over almost 2 years with us. That customer, that was a business that one of our first sales guy had on the phone, pitched them on the idea. They said, you know what, if you can actually deliver what you say, we'd love it. But we're really, we can't believe that you're going to actually do a good job, and we're afraid of that. Our salespeople told them, we're going to have transparency. We're going to share all the calls. Don't worry. They said, you know what, it sounds awesome, but we still kind of worry. Let us think about it. Sales call went on a second call with them, on a third call. 4 calls within 8 days, and they still couldn't pull the trigger. After the last call, I was chatting with my sales guy, and he was saying, you know what, it's crazy. We went through 4,000 questions. I answered all of them. They really, really, really want to do it, but they just can't get themselves over it. I don't know what to do. Now they sent over another 30 questions. And you know what? When we looked at everything they had, all their objections and all their questions, it all boiled down to one single thing: trust. They just didn't feel comfortable. They were afraid. They didn't trust us. And how could they? So eventually I said, you know what? Let's pick up the phone, talk to them right now. And I got involved. We called them and we said, you know what? Let's push aside all those technical questions. If we're honest to each other, you guys can't get over the fact that you are not trusting us, and you're afraid it's going to take a shit ton of time to actually coach us, train us, manage us, make sure that we're doing a good job, step in when we're not doing a good job. You're just afraid of all of that. Let's do this. We can argue this back and forth forever, but we will never know. Words will never make you trust us. We will never be able to convince you purely with words. Let's do this. Give us 1 week. We will study your product and solution. And exactly in 1 week, on Tuesday at 9 a.m. next week, we will call you, the CEO, and we will pitch you on your product. We will make a cold call. You'll play a potential customer. We will play your company, and we will pitch you. And your job is going to be the most difficult customer you could ever think of. Ask the most difficult question ever. And then let our actions speak louder than words. See how we react, see how we respond, see if we can sell you and convince you on buying your product. Because if you can do that, we can do it with anyone else. And they listened, they thought about it for a second, and they said, you know what? Okay, let's do it. A week later, we picked up the phone, we cold called them, and we sold them on their solution. And at the end of the call, we said, what do you think? Did we do okay? Well, how did you feel about this call? And the person on the other line, the CEO of the business, said, let's get started. Let's do this. I feel really good about you guys. That's the power of building personal trust and using your actions to create that trust versus just words. And you know what else? The crazy thing is, these guys never ever listened to a single call recording. We had the logs. We knew exactly what they were looking at or not. They were looking at the dashboards, our performance. We were doing weekly review calls, but they never ever actually listened to a single call we made. You know what? The moment we pitched them and we created that trust, we had it and we never lost it. So they never felt the need to actually go and actually listen in on a conversation that we made. The product had transparency to build trust. But what trumped that was the personal trust we built. You know what else is crazy and kind of like lame? We built that recording functionality and we love it, and lots of customers that are using Closer are benefiting from it. But for Elastic Sales, for the business that we actually built the calling recording functionality, not a single customer we won ever listens to calls. They all like the idea of it. They all like that we had that level of transparency in the product, but none of them actually needed it because they trusted us and we had earned that trust on a personal level. They liked the idea that there was transparency and trust on the product level, but they didn't really need it. And that's the power of trust. Also, to be frank and criticize ourselves a little bit, if we actually had done 2 weeks of calling before start coding, we might have never built the recording functionality because it was a cool idea, but it was not really what made people trust us. Our actions, the way we sold, the way we acted, the way we treated them was made them trust us. And trust always trumps transactions. Trust always comes first, then the transaction happens. So when you are in the sales business, you're in the trust building business. Never forget that.